The night air was heavy with tension as Monique held Daniel's arm, trying to calm the storm outside their apartment. The wail of police sirens pierced through the thin walls, shaking the fragile peace she had fought to build. Monique whispered, "Stay quiet, Daniel. Don't move near that window." Her heart raced with memories of neighbors dragged away unjustly and headlines of black lives stolen without justice. Daniel clenched his fists, anger burning against a system that painted him guilty before innocence could speak. Monique fought the urge to cry out, knowing fear could not shield him. Instead, she pulled him close and whispered, "I won't let them take you." The oppressive weight of survival pressed down, forcing her to be stronger than despair. Morning came, but peace did not follow. Monique forced herself into the kitchen, hands trembling as she poured weak coffee. She whispered, "We'll be okay, Daniel," though her words felt brittle. Daniel sat at the table, eyes red from sleeplessness, his expression carved with anger. The world had already stolen his innocence, and now it clawed for his future. Silence sat between them, louder than any scream. Monique's eyes strayed to bills stacked on the counter, the eviction notice hidden in a drawer, and the weight of survival pressing her chest. Yet she stood tall, her shoulders squared with fragile defiance. The apartment felt smaller as Monique walked the hallway, her eyes falling on photographs of Daniel's childhood. She whispered, "You've always been my strength, even when you were small." Her reflection in a cracked mirror showed a woman aged by struggle. The sirens from last night still echoed in her memory, pressing fear into her chest. The world outside promised only suspicion while their home carried ghosts of sacrifice. She pressed a hand over her heart, jaw tightening, as she vowed silently that history would not claim her son. Later, Monique stood outside her building, the sharp sun burning against her face. Across the street, Alicia waved, her voice soft with care. Alicia said, "He's strong, Miss Monique. He'll get through." Her words carried both comfort and fear. The neighborhood bore scars of injustice, each family touched in its own way. Monique forced a smile, though her chest tightened knowing what awaited. She thought of laughter, silenced by sirens, and futures, stolen by prejudice. For a fleeting moment, the warmth of sunlight felt like a fragile gift. That evening, Monique sat on the couch with Mr. Davis, a neighbor who had carried decades of scars. His voice was low but strong as he said, "The system's rigged, child. Fight with your head, not only your heart." Monique nodded, clutching a cushion as if it could block the truth. His wisdom was bitter, but carved from survival. Daniel listened quietly, his fire subdued by the weight of Davis' words. The room felt heavy, yet within it grew the seeds of resilience, pushing Monique toward a steel she would need for battles ahead. The evening air was heavy with smoke from nearby grills and laughter echoing faintly down the block. Daniel walked with two friends, but the sudden screech of tires silenced the joy. Police cruisers cut through the street, their headlights swallowing the night. Officers jumped out, their voices sharp commands that carried accusation before reason. Daniel raised his hand slowly, whispering, "I didn't do nothing." Monique, who had followed after hearing the commotion, saw her son frozen in the spotlight, like prey cornered. Fear surged, her heart screaming louder than her voice. She cried, "He's just a boy!" But the words cracked against the cold armor of authority. The night's fragile peace collapsed into chaos. An officer grabbed Daniel's wrist and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to the hood of the cruiser. Daniel winced, crying out, "I didn't do anything." Monique lunged forward, but another officer pushed her back, his tone sharp as he barked, "Stay back, ma'am." She fell against the curb, her palms scraping the asphalt, humiliation and rage colliding inside her chest. Neighbors began gathering, their phones raised to record, their voices swelling in protest. Daniel's face pressed against the cold steel, his breath fogging on the car, his body trembling under the weight of injustice. The night became a battlefield between silence and screams. The sound of metal cuffs snapped around Daniel's wrists, heavy and final. Monique screamed, "He's innocent." Her voice broke, echoing across the street like a mother's desperate prayer. Daniel's eyes met hers briefly, filled with both fear and defiance, as if begging her not to give in. The crowd's anger grew, shouts blending into the roar of sirens. An officer muttered, resisting arrest, though Daniel's body sagged, subdued, his dignity crushed. Monique clawed against the wall of uniforms, but was shoved back again. In that moment, she realized the fight had only begun. The cruiser door slammed, trapping Daniel inside like a cage of steel and glass. His fists pressed against the window, eyes wide with disbelief. Monique rushed to the car, pounding on the glass, shouting, "That's my son." Her tears streaked her cheeks, blurring her vision. The officer ignored her, adjusting his belt with cold indifference. Neighbors screamed in protest, chanting Daniel's name as if trying to shield him with their voices. The night pulsed with chaos, fear, and defiance. Monique's hands ached against the glass, but her spirit refused to shatter. The cruiser pulled away, leaving Monique on the street, her knees buckling as exhaust smoke clouded her vision. She collapsed, fists pounding the ground, her cries echoing in the night like a broken hymn. Neighbors surrounded her, some touching her shoulders, others shouting into cameras demanding justice. Alicia rushed to her side, whispering, "We'll fight, Miss Monique. He won't be alone." Monique raised her head, her tear-streaked face lit by retreating sirens. Though grief consumed her, a fire sparked within, a vow unspoken but unbreakable. She would fight the system that had stolen her son. Inside the holding cell, Daniel sat on a cold steel bench, his wrists aching from the cuffs now removed, but leaving deep marks. His eyes darted around the dirty concrete walls, graffiti scratched by countless forgotten souls. Another boy, barely older than him, muttered, "They don't care about us." Daniel swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing, but the fear clung to him like chains. The guard outside barked orders, his boots echoing against the linoleum floors. Daniel clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "I'll survive this. I have to." His face burned with both shame and defiance, the thin fluorescent lights overhead exposing every crack in his armor. At the police station desk, Monique argued with an officer whose tone dripped with indifference. She pleaded, "He's a child, let me see him." The officer barely glanced at her, stamping papers with deliberate slowness. "He's being processed," he muttered flatly, as if reciting a script. Monique's hands shook on the counter, her voice rising, "He hasn't done anything wrong." Behind her, Alicia hovered nervously, clutching her phone, whispering, "Well, get him out, Miss Monique." The station smelled of stale coffee and authority, every second dragging like punishment. Monique's tears glistened, but her spine stayed straight. She refused to be broken. Hours later, Daniel sat alone in an interrogation room, the ticking clock louder than his heartbeat. A detective entered, his tie loosened, his eyes sharp and calculating. He placed a file on the table and said, "We know what you did." Daniel shook his head fiercely, whispering, "I didn't do anything." The detective leaned closer, his voice calm but laced with threat. "The sooner you admit, the easier it will be." Daniel's fists trembled under the table, his fear blending with anger. In his mind he saw Monique's face, her promise that she would fight. He clung to that memory like air. That night, Monique sat on the front porch with Mr. Davis, her neighbor and mentor, the silence between them heavy. Finally he said, "This fight ain't just yours, it's ours. The system feeds on silence." Monique's eyes glistened as she whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Davis leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped, his gaze unyielding. "Strength ain't something you feel, it's something you choose." The crickets outside sang against the stillness of the block, their song a reminder of endurance. Monique exhaled sharply, her pain transforming into a vow. The war for Daniel had begun. Inside her apartment, Monique stared at the kitchen table covered with scattered bills, a notebook, and a flickering lamp. Alicia sat nearby, scrolling through her phone, whispering, "People are already posting videos of the arrest. It's spreading." Monique nodded slowly, whispering, "Good, let them see." Daniel's absence hung heavy in the room, his chair at the table painfully empty. The walls seemed to close in, But Monique felt something shift deep inside her, grief sharpening into resolve. Her voice grew stronger as she said, "If they want to fight, they'll get one." For the first time, Alicia smiled with hope. Monique sat with Alicia in the park, sunlight breaking through the clouds but doing little to ease her burden. Alicia said, "Daniel is strong, but he needs you strong too." Monique nodded slowly, her voice firm yet fragile. "I'll fight, even if it costs me everything." Children played in the distance, their laughter mocking the heaviness pressing her chest. For a fleeting moment, the warmth of Alicia's presence gave Monique the strength to breathe. She realized that even in despair, bonds of love were lifelines. With Daniel behind bars, hope had to survive through those still free. That evening, Monique visited a family friend she trusted for legal advice, only to hear words that cut deeper than silence. He said, "Maybe it's best to accept a deal. Fighting will only make things worse." Her breath caught, betrayal slicing her heart. She whispered, "You'd give up on my son so easily?" The man avoided her gaze, shuffling papers, his loyalty to comfort outweighing justice. Monique rose from her chair, anger burning her tears dry. She thought even allies could wound deeper than enemies. In that moment, she swore she would never again rely on someone unwilling to risk everything for truth. The next day, crowds filled the streets outside the courthouse, their chants rising like thunder. Signs with Daniel's name were lifted high, painted with hope and rage. Monique stood at the front, her voice breaking yet unshaken as she shouted, "Justice for Daniel!" Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but she didn't care about lenses, only the system that tried to bury her son. The energy of the crowd pulsed through her veins, each chant beating like a drum against the walls of oppression. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. The fight had grown beyond her family. Inside the juvenile detention center, Daniel lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, each creak of the building louder than his heartbeat. A guard walked past, keys clinking like chains of destiny. He turned to the wall whispering, "Mama, don't give up on me." His cellmate muttered, "Hope is a joke here." Daniel shut his eyes, forcing tears back, clinging to his mother's promise as a shield against despair. In the silence, he replayed her voice, her strength becoming his only anchor. Though walls confined his body, his spirit refused to surrender. Late at night, Monique sat at her kitchen table with Alicia and Mr. Davis, the three forming a circle of resilience. Alicia said, "The video is spreading. People are listening." Mr. Davis leaned forward, his voice steady, "But they'll push back hard. You need to be ready." Monique met both their eyes, her own burning with newfound fire. "Then let them come," she said firmly, "because I won't stop until Daniel is free." The clock ticked past midnight, shadows thick against the walls. But inside that small apartment, a spark had grown into a flame that no system could extinguish. Monique sat in the lawyer's office, her hands gripping the edge of the desk as he flipped through Daniel's file. He cleared his throat, avoiding her gaze, before saying, "They've charged him with resisting arrest and assaulting an officer." Her heart sank, disbelief flooding her chest. She whispered, "That's a lie and you know it." The lawyer hesitated, his silence louder than confession. Monique felt the air grow heavy, realizing this system wasn't built for justice. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor, declaring, "If you won't fight for my son, then I will." Later that night, Alicia rushed into Monique's apartment, phone in hand. "Miss Monique, look," she said breathlessly, showing a video online. The footage revealed Daniel pinned on the cruiser, beaten while already cuffed, officers shouting fabricated commands. Monique covered her mouth, her body shaking as the truth burned her eyes. She whispered, "They tried to bury him with lies." Alicia's voice trembled. "This proves everything." The weight of betrayal by those sworn to protect hit Monique like a hammer. But grief twisted into rage and rage into fuel. She knew this video would either save Daniel or destroy them all. The next morning, Monique confronted a community leader she once trusted, Reverend Carter, at the church steps. "You said you'd stand with us," she shouted, "but you've been meeting with them." He adjusted his collar, his voice calm but dismissive. Sometimes survival means compromise. The betrayal pierced deeper than any enemy's strike. Monique's voice cracked. "You're selling us out." Around them, parishioners paused, their faces torn between loyalty and disbelief. For the first time, Monique saw that corruption wore many faces, even those wrapped in faith. In his cell, Daniel was summoned to meet with the warden. Sitting across from him, the warden spoke smoothly. "Confess, and this can all go away." Daniel's eyes blazed, his voice firm. "I won't confess to something I didn't do." The warden leaned closer, his face cold. "Then your mother will suffer for your pride." Daniel's jaw tightened, fury burning beneath his fear. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "She's stronger than you think." For the first time, Daniel realized the system wasn't just trying to break him, but also the woman who refused to let go of him. That night, Monique sat with Mr. Davis and Alicia in the kitchen, the air thick with tension. Mr. Davis said, "The video changes everything, but it also paints a target on you." Alicia whispered, "They're already watching us." Monique closed her eyes, breathing deeply, then opened them with fire burning behind her tears. "Let them watch," she said fiercely, "because I'm not hiding anymore." The clock ticked past midnight, shadows long against the walls. What began as a mother's cry had become a movement, but the path ahead promised danger as sharp as any blade. The courthouse buzzed with tension, voices echoing through marble halls as Monique entered, clutching her purse like armor. Protesters stood outside chanting Daniel's name, their cries seeping through the walls. She whispered to herself, "This is it, no turning back." Daniel was led in, shackled at the wrists, but his eyes locked on hers, a silent exchange of strength. The prosecutor smirked as he arranged papers, while the defense attorney sat stiff, half-hearted in posture. Monique felt the weight of generations pressing on her shoulders. Every step she took into that courtroom was not only for Daniel, but for every voice silenced before him. The prosecutor's voice rang out sharp and rehearsed, painting Daniel as a dangerous young man. Monique's chest tightened, rage building as lies spilled into the air. She glanced at the jury, their faces unreadable, but their pens scratching notes that could decide her son's fate. Alicia sat in the back, whispering prayers while Mr. Davis leaned forward, his eyes blazing with protective fire. Monique clenched her fists, whispering under her breath, "You won't bury him." Every word from the state felt like a dagger, but she refused to flinch. Monique was called to the stand, her hands trembling as she swore to tell the truth. She sat upright, her voice shaking at first, but gathering strength with every word. "Daniel is not a criminal. He's a son, a student, a boy who was brutalized by those meant to protect him." Gasps rippled through the gallery, and even the judge leaned forward. Tears streaked Monique's cheeks, but she refused to look away from the jury. Her pain became testimony, her love turned weapon. She declared, "They want to break us, but we will not be broken." The defense attorney finally played the video of Daniel's arrest. The screen lit the courtroom, showing officers striking him while he was cuffed, their voices screaming fabricated commands. Gasps erupted, and whispers filled the air like fire spreading through dry grass. The prosecutor rose, objecting loudly, but the judge overruled, his gavel cracking like thunder. Daniel lowered his head, ashamed but also vindicated. The truth finally laid bare. Monique gripped the edge of the bench, whispering, "They can't hide anymore." The weight of injustice was visible now, impossible to deny. Chaos erupted as the prosecutor's objections grew louder, and the gallery shouted with anger and support. The judge slammed his gavel, demanding order, but the truth could not be contained anymore. Daniel lifted his head, his eyes locking with Monique's, a silent promise forged in fire. Monique stood in defiance, her voice carrying across the chamber, "We will not be silenced." Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing as if history itself was recording this moment. For the first time, the system trembled under the weight of one mother's unbreakable love. The courtroom was silent as the jury returned, their faces solemn. Monique gripped the bench, her knuckles white, whispering, "Please, God." The foreman stood, voice steady, as he read the verdict. "Not guilty." Gasps filled the room, tears streaming down Monique's face as Daniel's shoulders sagged with relief. For a brief moment, time slowed, her world cracking open with hope. She reached toward her son, but chains still bound his wrists, reminding her that freedom was never without cost. Still, victory belonged to them, if only for now. Outside the courthouse, crowds erupted into cheers, signs raised high, chants echoing down city blocks. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust into Monique's face. She spoke firmly. This isn't just about Daniel. This is about every child stolen by injustice. Her words cut through the noise, carried by the wind like fire. Daniel walked beside her, shackles gone, his steps unsteady, but his head held high. Alicia hugged him tightly, whispering, "We never gave up on you." The community's roar was not just celebration, but a declaration. The fight had only begun. That night, back home, Monique cooked a simple meal, her hands steady though exhaustion weighed her down. Daniel sat at the table, quietly staring at the plate before him. "It feels strange," he admitted, "being here free when others aren't." Monique reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Then we carry them with us. Always." Mr. Davis nodded from his chair, his voice rough. "Freedom's never free, but you've earned the right to fight." In that small kitchen, sorrow and joy mingled like old friends, bound by resilience. Later that week, Monique visited the courthouse steps alone, the protests now quiet, the streets calm. She stood where she once screamed for justice, now silent, her breath forming clouds in the evening air. Her mind replayed Daniel's cries, the chains, the verdict. She whispered to herself, "We survived, but the war goes on." The streetlights flickered above her, casting long shadows that stretched like history itself. She straightened her shoulders, her body weary, but her spirit unbroken. She knew she carried not just her son's freedom, but the burden of all who could not stand. In the final moments, Monique walked down her street, Daniel by her side, the night quiet except for distant sirens. He said softly, "Mama, what now?" She looked ahead, eyes steady, voice strong. "Now we keep fighting, until no one else has to live like this." They walked into the darkness, silhouettes framed by flickering streetlights, their shadows stretching forward into uncertain tomorrow. The world had scarred them, but it had not broken them. Their love had survived, and through it, a movement had been born.